The sky was burning. Smoke poured from the broken engines of the small human supply ship. It had been a routine mission, just delivering parts and food to the outer colonies. But something had gone wrong. Something big. James Carson gritted his teeth as he struggled to control the crash. His hands were shaking. Red lights blinked all around him. The planet below was getting closer and closer. It wasn't on any major charts. Just a quiet farming world called Orcs. The ship hit the ground hard. Metal screamed. The crash threw James forward. His head hit the console and everything went black. He woke up to silence. The air smelled like grass, smoke, and strange flowers. His body hurt everywhere. His leg was bleeding. His uniform was torn. He tried to sit up, but pain shot through his chest. Then he heard footsteps. Heavy ones. Slow and steady. James reached for his sidearm, but it was gone. He looked around. Through the broken hull of the ship, he saw a shadow, tall, wide, and moving slowly toward him. It was not human. A large creature stood in front of the wreck. Its skin was rough and brown like old bark. Its face was wide, with eyes like golden coins. It had 4 thick fingers on each hand, and it held a wooden staff. It wore simple clothes made of cloth and leather. It looked at James with curiosity, not fear. The alien bent down and placed something on the ground. It was a bowl. Inside was warm food, thick, steaming stew with floating roots and meat. Beside it, a round fruit, the color of the sunset. James frowned. He was weak, hungry, but confused. The alien spoke slowly and gently. "I am Darrow. I am farmer. You? Crash from sky. Hurt. No weapon. No threat." James blinked. The alien's voice was deep, like thunder rolling over hills. "I don't need charity," James said weakly. "You need food," Darrow replied, setting down a wooden spoon. "And rest. Then you decide." James stared at the bowl. His stomach growled. He tried to resist, but the pain and hunger were too strong. He dragged himself closer and ate. The stew was strange but rich. Spices danced on his tongue. The fruit was juicy and sweet. It tasted like hope. That night, James lay in a warm bed, of soft grass and cloth inside a large barn. The barn was filled with giant animals, sleeping quietly. Strange tools hung from the walls. Darrow sat nearby, carving a piece of wood. James spoke after a long silence. "Why are you helping me?" Darrow didn't stop carving. "You fell. You are alone. That is enough reason." James looked at the alien. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall. Yet he moved gently, spoke kindly. Nothing like the brutal aliens James had fought during the border wars. "You don't even know me," James said. Darrow paused. Then he looked James in the eyes. "You are tired. You carry pain. I see it." James looked away. "Let me carry it," Darrow said softly. "I am Baroki. We carry burdens. Just share a meal with me tonight." James didn't know what to say. The words felt old, like a promise, a sacred one. "I don't understand," James muttered. "You will." The next morning, James woke to the sound of birds and wind through trees. Darrow brought him more food and checked his wounds. The Baroki used natural medicine, crushed leaves, blue gel from a flower, and something like warm clay. It worked fast. James could sit up now. He leaned on a wooden crutch Darrow had made. As the days passed, James learned more about Orve. It was a peaceful planet. No cities, no machines, only farms, forests, and mountains. The Baroki were the only species here. They lived in large families, worked together, and shared everything. They believed in strength, not for war, but for service. The strong carried the weak. The old taught the young. The quiet were listened to. James was not used to this. Back in the human colonies, weakness meant danger. Trust was rare. Peace was always temporary. Darrow took James to his fields. Giant root plants, called kale, grew in rows. Their vines moved slowly, almost breathing. Darrow showed James how to cut them safely and gather their seeds. Kali feeds our people, Darrow explained. Also, heals our hearts. James didn't believe plants could do that, but when he touched one, he felt a strange calm in his chest. Over time, James started helping more. He fixed a broken fence. He cleaned tools. He carried small baskets, even though his legs still hurt. He still had nightmares, flashes of gunfire, screams, burning ships. He'd wake up in sweat, breathing fast, each time Darrow was nearby, silent, watching over him. "You fought in war," Darrow said one night. James nodded. "Lost friends, lost myself too, maybe." Darrow didn't speak for a while. "We carry those. We lose. Their weight is heavy, but we share it." James looked at him. "You keep saying that?" Darrow turned his golden eyes to the stars. Baroque way. "When someone is broken, we offer to carry their burden. All we ask is one meal together. One true meal, without lies, without fear." James stared at the stew in his hands. "You think a meal can fix everything?" Darrow smiled softly. "No, but it is where healing begins." One day, while walking through the fields, James stopped and looked at the quiet land. The wind moved gently. The kale vines rustled softly. Birds sang above. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not the kind forced by silence after battle. Real peace. Living, breathing, waiting for nothing. Darrow stood beside him, carrying a basket twice his size. "You are stronger now," Darrow said. James chuckled. "Still can't lift half what you can." Darrow gave a deep chuckle. "Strength is not in arms. It is in choice." James looked up at the alien. "You really believe that?" "I do." That night, James brought a meal of his own. It wasn't much, just some dried human food from his emergency pack. But he warmed it, mixed it with local spices, and offered it to Darrow. The Baroque's eyes softened. "You share your meal with me?" James nodded. "Then we share the burden." They sat in silence, eating under the stars, and slowly the weight James carried began to feel lighter. The sun rose slowly over the fields of Orvi. Golden light touched the long green rows of kale plants. A soft wind moved through the leaves like a whisper. Birds sang. In the distance, the sound of water flowing filled the air. It was peaceful, completely different from anything James Carson had ever known. He stood beside Darrow, leaning on a wooden cane the Baroque had carved for him. James was healing. His wounds were no longer open, and his strength was coming back. He could walk short distances now, though he still limped. The pain was still there, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. "I never thought a place like this could exist," James said softly. Darrow stood beside him, holding a giant wooden rake. In one hand, the tool looked small in his strong grip, even though it was taller than James. "We plant, we grow, we carry," Darrow said. "This is the Baroque way." Every morning, James helped Darrow in the fields. The kale roots were hard to harvest. Each plant was wrapped in thick vines, and its roots grew deep into the soil. Darrow taught James how to touch the vines gently so they wouldn't resist. Baroque believed kale were alive, not like animals, but still aware. They grew better when treated with kindness. At first, James didn't believe that, but after a few days, he noticed something strange. When he moved too fast or roughly, the vines tightened and became harder to cut. But when he whispered to them, like Darrow showed him, the vines loosened. The roots almost offered themselves. "I don't get it," James said one morning. "Why would plants respond like that?" Darrow smiled. "Because everything listens, human, even the earth." As the days passed, James started sleeping better. His nightmares came less often. The heavy memories of war, the blood, the explosions, the screaming, still lived inside him, but now there was something else too. Peace, purpose, friendship. He noticed how Darrow moved. The Baroque was massive, strong enough to lift a tree or bend metal. But he never used his strength to scare or show off. Instead, Darrow used his hands to build, to carry, to help. Once, a baby Baroque got stuck in a muddy ditch. Before the others could react, Darrow stepped in and lifted the child out with one hand, smiling softly as he wiped the mud from the small one's face. That evening, James said, "You're the strongest being I've ever met, but you never act like it." Darrow replied simply, "Strength is for lifting others." James had no answer. Only respect. They built a new irrigation line for the east fields. The old one had broken, and the plants there were starting to dry. James offered to help, though his body still ached. "I can do the planning," James said. "You carry the big stuff." Darrow nodded. For 2 days, they worked side by side. James drew a simple design using sticks and rocks, showing where the water would flow. Darrow carried the stone pipes, each one heavier than James could even roll. Other Baroque joined. No one gave orders, no one fought. They all moved together, calmly and patiently, like a slow river. When the water finally flowed through the new channel and reached the thirsty Calais, everyone cheered softly, just claps and nods. That night, they shared a meal under the stars. James sat beside Darrow, watching the firelight dance on the Baroque's skin. "You're not just farmers," James said. "You're builders of peace." Darrow looked at him and replied, "And you are learning to carry, James Carson." But not everything was easy. One day, while James was checking a water valve, he heard a buzzing sound. Not from insects, but from the sky. A small drone hovered high above the farm. Its red light blinked rapidly, scanning. James froze. "Darrow!" he shouted. Darrow looked up, his calm face turning serious. James pulled out his small communicator, the one item he had saved from his wrecked ship. He turned it on, checked the frequency. The drone was military, not human, corporate. "Someone?" "Found me," James said. "And they're not here to help." Darrow walked over, eyes locked on the sky. "We must prepare," he said simply. James explained everything he feared. There were rumors back in the colonies about a mining corporation interested in Orvai's underground minerals. Calais plants only grew where certain rare elements were buried. If the company found out, they might come to take the land, and they wouldn't ask politely. "They'll bring bots," James warned. "Enforcers, maybe even soldiers." Darrow listened in silence. "We are not fighters," he said, "but we will not leave our soil." James felt something stir in his chest. He didn't want to fight again. He didn't want to kill or destroy, but he also couldn't let this peaceful world be taken. "I'll help protect this place," James said, "even if I have to stand alone." Darrow placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "No, you will not stand alone." The next few days were different. James began training the younger Baroque in simple things, like how to make barriers from thick wood, how to move quickly between cover, and how to signal danger. Darrow helped carry materials. He built towers from logs and dug trenches where water could be redirected if needed. The Baroque didn't want to fight, but they were willing to defend. They didn't build weapons. They built strength. One morning, as James watched Darrow lift an entire wooden platform by himself, he asked, "Have you ever used your strength in war?" Darrow shook his head. "We fight only to protect, never to conquer. But if others bring war to our door, we do not run." James nodded. He finally understood the Baroque way. On the 7th night after the drone appeared, James and Darrow sat beside the fire once again. The stars above were bright. The kali plants glowed faintly in the dark, their roots pulsing with life. James handed Darrow a bowl. This time it was human-made soup with local herbs mixed in. "A small thank you," James said, "for carrying so much." Darrow accepted the bowl with both hands. We shared burdens. Now we share strength. James looked into the flames. "I'm not the same man who crashed here. You were never broken," Darrow said softly. "Only tired. Now, you are healing." James smiled for the first time in a long while. Not because he felt strong, but because he was no longer alone, and somewhere deep inside he knew the storm was coming. But he and Darrow would face it together. The peace did not last. On the 14th day after the drone was seen in the sky, James Carson stood at the edge of Darrow's field. His eyes were locked on the horizon. Dust was rising, a slow spreading cloud, unnatural in shape. "They're coming," he whispered. Darrow joined him, carrying a large basket filled with kali roots. His calm eyes followed the dust trail. "Yes," Darrow said, "but we are ready." The next few hours passed slowly. James and the Baroque gathered in the central field near the village. From far away, they saw the first ship land, gray, flat, and full of noise. It wasn't a military vessel. It had the mark of the Velatrix Mining Corporation, a giant V, with 3 claws under it. Velatrix was known across the galaxy. Wherever they landed, silence followed. They stripped planets for profit. They called it resource optimization. James had heard the stories. Soon more ships landed. Metallic ramps extended. Then came the enforcers, tall, armored robots with blinking red lights and powerful arms. They moved in formation, scanning the fields. Behind them, a small group of humans and aliens in clean uniforms stepped out. The leader was a man with sharp eyes and a fake smile. His voice echoed through a speaker as he walked toward the waiting Baroque. "Greetings, people of Orvai," he said. "I'm Supervisor Grent. Velatrix has legally claimed mineral rights to this land. This is now company property." The Baroque did not move. Darrow stepped forward, towering above all others. "This land is ours, passed from seed to seed. We do not sell. We do not leave." Supervisor Grent didn't blink. He pulled out a device and tapped it. A glowing screen showed charts and signatures. "Your world is not part of the Galactic Council. Under Code 42B, unclaimed resources may be harvested for galactic growth. We offer employment and housing, or you may leave." James stepped forward. His voice was sharp. "Did you send the drone?" Grant looked at him. "And who are you?" "A human. A soldier. And your warning." Grant laughed. "You think one injured man and a bunch of farmers can stop us?" James didn't answer. Darrow placed a hand on his shoulder. "This soil remembers its keepers," Darrow said. "We are not alone." The next day, Velatrix sent machines. Massive harvesters rolled toward the kali fields. Sharp spinning arms cut vines and pulled roots. By force, the Baroque watched in silent pain. Each plant destroyed was like a wound to the land. James couldn't stay silent. He gathered the young Baroque and showed them how to create simple blockades. They used fallen trees, stones, and water ditches to stop the machine's path. The Baroque were slow but strong. Within hours, they had blocked the main harvesting route. Supervisor Grant was not pleased. "You have 24 hours to remove these barriers," he warned, "or we'll use force." James looked at Darrow. "They'll bring weapons. Next." "We will not strike first," Darrow said, "but we will not fall." That night, James walked alone to the crash site of his ship. The wreckage was cold and quiet now. He searched through broken panels and found a small case hidden under the floor, his emergency toolkit. Inside were EMP charges, a flare pistol, and a signal jammer. He returned to the village. If we can't match their weapons, he told Darrow, we use our minds. We fight without killing. Darrow nodded. We fight to protect, not to destroy. The next day, the first battle began. Velatrix. Bots marched into the fields. Their legs stomped hard on the soil, and their arms glowed with blue light. Stun beams ready, but the Barocchi were ready. As the bots entered the first field, hidden trenches opened beneath them. The machines fell, tangled in vines and mud. The Barocchi didn't attack. They just blocked, trapped, and slowed. James used the EMP charge from behind a stone wall. With a soft click and a small pulse, 4 bots shut down at once. Sparks flew, and the machines dropped like metal statues. Grant's voice came through the speakers again. You are resisting corporate law. This is illegal, James replied through a speaker of his own. This is your warning. Leave Orvi now. On the second day, Grant grew angrier. He sent in flying drones with lasers. This time, they came to hurt. One drone fired a beam that scorched part of the western field. A Kali grove caught fire. The Barocchi rushed to put it out. Darrow carried a full water barrel by himself, pouring it over the flames. His arms were black with smoke, but his face remained calm. James fired his flare pistol at one drone. It exploded in midair, falling in pieces. Later that night, Darrow sat by the burned ground. James joined him. This is only the beginning, James said. Darrow looked at the stars. Then we begin too. The villagers held a silent gathering. Old Barocchi came forward, placing stones around the burned field. It was a symbol, one of mourning and protection. James watched with respect. Darrow spoke softly. Every field has memory. This one remembers pain. But we will grow again. James looked at his friend. You still believe in peace? Yes, Darrow said, but peace does not mean weakness. By the 5th day, Velatrix had lost a dozen bots, 3 drones, and most of their patients. Grant called for reinforcements, mercenaries in armor with real weapons. But something unexpected happened. A transmission came from orbit. A neutral observer ship from the Cordon Alliance had received James's emergency beacon. The Cordons were peaceful traders, but they respected territory rights. They announced they would begin recording everything on Orvi for galactic review. Grant was furious. You can't do this. We have legal claim. But with the Cordon ship above, Velatrix could not attack without being seen. James and Darrow stood together at the village entrance as the last mining machine retreated. The Barocchi did not cheer. They simply stood silently, strong and still. The land was safe, for now. That night, under the twin moons of Orvi, James and Darrow shared another meal. This time, it was roasted root with spicy herbs and soft bread made from kale seed. James broke the bread in 2 and handed half to Darrow. You carried a lot this week. Darrow smiled. So did you, human. They ate in silence, and the stars watched quietly as if honoring their bond. The quiet fields of Orvi held their breath. After the battle with the mining machines, everyone knew it was only a pause. The Velatrix Mining Corporation would return with more weapons and more force. The peaceful Barocchi farmers had shown they would not give up their land. But at what cost? James Carson looked across the golden rows of kale roots. The plants swayed softly in the warm wind. The sun was setting behind tall mountains. His legs still hurt, but his heart felt steady. Darrow stood beside him, holding his wooden staff. The big alien's eyes were calm, but James could see the weight inside them. The company will come back, James said quietly. Yes, Darrow answered, but we carry together now. We will not fall. That evening, the Barocchi gathered in the village square. Fires burned softly. Old and young sat close. No one spoke loud. The silence was heavy but full of meaning. James stood in the middle. He had become part of this strange family. this quiet strength. "We have no weapons to match theirs," James told them. "But we have our land, our lives. We have each other." A young Baroque stepped forward. His voice was soft, but clear. "We can use what the land gives us," he said. "Traps, barriers, strength, not to kill, but to protect." Darrow nodded. "We carry our home on our backs. We protect what feeds us." James smiled. "Then we stand. Together." The next morning was busy. The Baroque worked like one body. They built strong fences from thick logs. They dug deep trenches filled with water. They tied thorny vines to poles to create sharp barriers. They laid stones and mud to make slippery paths. James helped where he could. He showed them how to move quietly and watch the horizon for signs of the company's return. Darrow carried heavy loads, huge wooden beams, barrels of water, and stones heavier than James could lift alone. The Baroque's strength was amazing. Their muscles moved slowly but with power. They never rushed. They did not waste energy. By nightfall, the village looked like a fortress made of earth and wood. Days passed. The company did not come. But James knew it was only a matter of time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, a signal came from the Cordon Alliance ship orbiting above. "The company has sent a large fleet," the voice said through the village speakers. "They plan to return with full force." The Baroque listened quietly. James said, "We need a plan. We can't fight like soldiers, but we can fight like farmers." Darrow smiled softly. "Then we use what we have. The land will carry us." The day the fleet returned was cold and gray. Huge ships landed with loud roars. Robots and mercenaries poured out. This time the machines had weapons, laser cannons, heavy armor, and fast movement. James stood with Darrow at the front line. "Remember," Darrow said, "we do not fight to destroy. We fight to protect." The Baroque moved into position. When the company forces advanced, they met unexpected resistance. The Baroque used the trenches and barriers perfectly. Robots stumbled into deep pits. Sharp vines cut wires. Water trenches shocked machines. James and the Baroque young men used simple tools, stones, sticks, and nets to slow the attackers. Darrow lifted a heavy wooden gate and slammed it into a group of bots, knocking them over like toys. The battle was long and difficult. James moved quickly, directing the Baroque and using his flare pistol to warn of attacks. At one point, a heavy bot fired a blast that knocked James to the ground. He felt a sharp pain in his ribs but pushed himself up. Darrow was near, carrying a fallen Baroque out of harm's way. When a bot aimed at James, Darrow stepped forward, blocking the shot with his massive body. "You shared your meal," Darrow whispered. "Now I carry your pain." James felt a wave of gratitude and strength. Slowly, the attackers began to lose. Their machines broke down in mud. Their weapons jammed in vines. Their mercenaries grew tired and scared. With no easy victory, the company forces retreated. The Baroque stood firm. The land was safe. That night, the village was quiet but alive. James and Darrow sat beside a fire. The Yadare air smelled of roasted kale and smoke. James looked at his friend and said, "You saved my life today." Darrow smiled. "We carry each other. That is the way." James nodded. "Do you think they will come again?" "Maybe," Darrow said. "But we will be ready." The next morning, James walked through the fields. The damage from battle was visible. Broken plants, trampled soil. But the earth was strong. He knelt and touched the ground. "We will grow again," he said quietly. A young Baroque approached and handed James a small seed. "For planting," the young one said, "for tomorrow." James smiled and planted the seed. Months passed. The village rebuilt. The fields grew green and strong again. The Cordon Alliance ship stayed nearby, watching, recording, and protecting. The Velatrix Mining Corporation was forced to leave Orve alone, for now. James decided to stay. He was no longer a soldier lost in war. He was part of this land, part of this family. One evening, under the twin moons, Darrow approached James. "Tonight," Darrow said softly, "share a meal with me again." James smiled and nodded. They ate slowly, quietly, under the stars. Two different beings, one human, one Baraki, carrying each other's burdens, and the galaxy watched silently. The seasons changed slowly on Orve. The green fields grew taller. The Kali roots spread deeper in the earth. The sky shifted from bright blue days to soft purple evenings under the twin moons. James Carson had become part of the village. He no longer felt like an outsider. The pain in his leg was less. The nightmares had almost stopped. His heart felt calm. Darrow stood nearby, strong as always, but quieter now. He watched the new crops with pride. It had been many months since the last attack. The Velatrix Mining Corporation had left, chased away by the united will of the Baroki. And James, with the quiet watch of the Cordon Alliance above, the village was alive again. Children laughed. Farmers worked. The soft hum of life returned. James walked among them, helping wherever he could. He taught some humans who had come to live here with simple tools and stories of peace. Together they built a small school, a place where Baroki and humans learned side by side. Darrow often visited the school. He listened to the children's laughter and stories. His huge hands carefully held books and tablets, curious about the human way of learning. One evening, as the twin suns began to set, James found Darrow sitting alone by the edge of the fields. The giant farmer looked tired but peaceful. James sat beside him. "Darrow," James said softly, "do you ever miss the old days? Before I came?" Darrow looked at the horizon. "The old days were quiet," he said, "but lonely." James nodded. "You have given me family," he said. "You carried my burdens when I thought I was broken." Darrow smiled. "And you carried mine, human." That night, Darrow invited James for a meal. The invitation was simple, but powerful. "I'll carry your burdens," Darrow said again, "if you share a meal with me tonight." James accepted. The village gathered quietly around the fire. The smell of roasted kale and fresh bread filled the air. The stars twinkled above like tiny watchful eyes. They ate slowly. No words were needed. The meal was a promise, a bond. After the meal, James stood and looked at the sky. "The galaxy may be full of war," he said, "but here is peace and hope." Darrow placed a heavy hand on James's shoulder. "Wherever you go, carry this peace with you," Darrow said. "And remember, no burden is too heavy if shared." James smiled, feeling the warmth of true friendship. Years passed. The school grew. More humans came to Orvi. The Baroki welcomed them all. The quiet planet became a place of learning, healing, and strength. James became a leader, a bridge between two worlds. But he never forgot the first meal, the meal that began healing. One morning, a young Baroki child ran to James. "Teacher, the Kali bloom early this year." James looked out to the fields. Bright blue flowers covered the roots, signs of strong health. He smiled. "Good. Life always finds a way." Darrow stood beside him, his eyes shining. "Yes," he said, "because we carry together." Under the twin suns and the quiet stars, the human and the farmer alien stood side by side. Two beings, different but connected. One had carried the burdens of war. The other carried the burdens of the land. Together they carried hope.